There are 6, arguably 7, strategies for managing risk. But the one that is least understood is also the most powerful if you can make it work. And that strategy is to remove the risk entirely. I recently recovered the rights to my book Risk Happens from the publisher, who moved out of publishing business and management related books. As a result, I brought out a second edition. And in that I talk about the strategies for managing risk. But the ultimate strategy, the gold standard, is to remove the risk entirely. The problem with this, though, is that it can often be very hard to find a way to do this. So I'd like to look at 5 ways to implement the remove risk strategy. It's not always possible, but the first way that we can sometimes do it is to over-design the solution, a gold-plated solution, if you will. This is about over-specifying. Usually we focus on the core functionality and over-specify the robustness of the solution that provides that core functionality. Examples include redundant components or multiple components that do the same thing, or oversized strength components, or components that use materials with higher specifications than strictly necessary. This solution is beloved of the engineers who build structures and mechanisms upon which our lives depend, like the civil engineers who build bridges. The cost of this approach is high, but hopefully we can recoup the costs, firstly through the elimination of failure, and secondly through the reduction in lifetime maintenance costs. Clearly, this isn't a solution that is favoured by most consumer electronics companies. The second way to remove risk is to buy certainty. We do this by buying pre-existing components that we know will work, rather than designing ideal, perfect components with all the perfect functionality from scratch. These components are often known as COTS, or commercial off-the-shelf components, because we buy them from a catalogue or to a fixed specification that a supplier has already created and tested. We can have high confidence in those components, and whilst we may have to take some form of compromise because that component isn't designed specifically for our needs, that higher level of certainty and resilience is what we trade for the reduced functionality. The third approach to removing risk is to find an alternative solution. It may be that the solution that we design up front has some element of risk to time, budget, or quality. However, there may be an alternative solution which has a higher degree of certainty, possibly absolute certainty. A good example of this is where stakeholders may resist our preferred solution, thereby causing delays or extra expense. If instead we accept perhaps what we view to be a lesser solution but one that our stakeholders approve of, we remove the risk of their resistance and therefore the costs and the delays that will arise from that resistance. Fourth, we can sometimes remove the risks by addressing the root cause of that risk. There are a number of root cause analysis techniques that will help us find those root causes. Examples include failure mode and effect analysis, FMEA, pre-mortem, fishbone analysis, or the 5 whys approach. These can help us to find root causes and find a strategy that will remove the threat entirely. However, this can be a time-consuming and exhausting process. But if we can find all of the failure modes and all of the causes up front, then we can apply different strategies to remove each element of the risk and therefore remove the risk entirely. And finally, the best way to remove the risk is to remove the risky element itself from your plan. If you can't control the risk from an activity and the threat level of that activity is unacceptably high, then the only thing you can do is to remove that activity from your plan entirely, to not take the risk. And of course, This is the message of many public health campaigns. Don't do the risky behaviour, and therefore you won't incur the threat. I suspect that most of the people who watch this video will apply that strategy to some aspect of your life. So here we have 5 strategies that will remove risk entirely. But please note, these strategies will remove a specific risk from your project. They will not remove all risk from your project. The only way to do that is to not do the project at all, which of course is the subject of risk tolerance and our ability to accept risk at all. We've done a video on that. Please take a look at it. But as one of the strategies for dealing with a risk on a project, risk removal is viable as long as you can find a way to do it. And if you can find a way to do it, it is ultimately the gold standard risk strategy for your project risks. If you've enjoyed this video and learned from it, please do give us a like. It really does help the channel, because I'll be creating loads more great project management content for you. So why not subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of it. And I'll look forward to seeing you in the next one.